If you came to this video thinking I was going to talk good about this animation, well, I have news for you, you're right, because this new Castlevania is incredible, and if you didn't like it, it's because you're already dead inside. I want to say, in fact, it does have a single defect, but let's move on to the review. So guys, how are you? I hope you're doing well. I'm the Monio, the interdimensional demon that talks the most about Castlevania on YouTube, and you're on my channel. Castlevania Nocturne is the newest animation in the Castlevania universe, produced by Netflix, and the first thing you need to know is that this new Castlevania takes place after that first Castlevania animation. Some characters like Sypha are mentioned, but it is not necessarily a continuation in terms of story, since a lot of time has passed since the events with Sypha and Trevor, to the point that these new characters don't even know who Dracula was. But let's talk about this new animation. The first thing that catches your attention, right in the first scenes, is the quality of the drawing lines, and the animation. Seriously, I already liked the style of the first animation, but now they've raised the quality and everything is more elaborate. The character designs, the colors, everything is beautiful, with a higher visual quality than many animes, despite being an American animation. Another thing that stands out are the fights. They are very well animated, with good choreography, and with very beautiful effects. In general, they are very well directed scenes. There are some moments where I think the animation exaggerates a little and puts too many elements on screen at the same time, causing a certain amount of confusion and excess information. But I believe that the idea is precisely to represent visual chaos to show the intensity of that battle, and this type of scene only happens once in an episode. The other times battles are really cool and you understand perfectly what is happening. The story begins when our protagonist, Richter Belmont, is still a child and is being taken by his mother and current representative of the Belmont clan, to embark for France and live there, when they are confronted by a very powerful vampire, who kills his mother of Richter and leaves him alive, giving him the possibility to grow up and take revenge. When I saw that the series started this way, I imagined it would be a simple cliché story, with a shallow villain who killed the protagonist's mother and who would only serve to get revenge. But as the story progresses, we realize that this character, there's nothing cliché. In fact, it's very interesting, with dubious and mysterious intentions, and so far, it doesn't have such a clear objective, and that, in my opinion, is great. But the Monio, you said that the protagonist is called Richter Belmont. He would be the same Richter Belmont from the Super Nintendo game, so is this an adaptation of the story from that game? Well, yes and no. Yes, it is Richter Belmont, the same character we see in the Super Nintendo game, although he appears in other games, as well as Maria, another character from the game who appears in the series. But the series is not necessarily an adaptation of the script of these games, and this was a complaint people had regarding the previous Castlevania series, that it did not faithfully adapt the story of the games. But for me, in fact, this has always been a quality. Let's face it, the history of games, especially the older ones, has always been very simple and without much character development, and the first series was great in this regard, despite being abruptly ended in the 4th season due to accusations of harassment by its creators. But I can say with certainty that if you liked the first adaptation that Netflix made, you will like this new series, as it surpasses the first in practically everything, including script, animation, art direction. Everything is very well done. The idea of adding historical concepts such as revolution to the lore of the series gave a very realistic aspect to the plot, where vampires are part of hierarchies of power and are linked to nobility, where they make agreements so that only those who are not noble suffer from the real risks that vampires present. One of the characters I liked the most was Annette. She is one of the people who is fighting for the freedom of her people as a leader, or revolutionary, and a former slave. This character is the one with the best development in the series, even more than the protagonist, and through her the series addresses themes linked to the cultures of African peoples, such as traditions, ancestries, their relationships with the afterlife, and partially portrays all the suffering of the enslavement of these peoples, since given the power relations of the time, obviously there would be slavery in this world, with or without vampires, Besides, it's really cool and very interesting that the series finally addresses not only the Christian God, but also African deities and the way they relate to the lore of this world. Maria is also another cool character, but her character arc is more linked to other revelations in the story that will be left for the end, and Richter, despite not being as in-depth, manages to be a cool protagonist who has to overcome his own traumas to fulfill his role and help the other protagonists. I would just like to highlight the moment when he puts the white headband on his head and looks like the character we see in the game, a very cool moment of homage, as well as other inspired frames in the game, simply memorable. I also really like the fact that the vampire who kills Richter Belmont's mother is not necessarily the villain of the season, and also the other vampire who is presented as an emissary of the Messiah. If she were the villain, it would be a bit cliché, as the character is sadistic and has all the characteristics you expect from a villain. Basically, she is the character you are meant to hate, and the real villain of the series is the vampire Messiah. Despite her not having any direct emotional bond with any of the protagonists, she works very well as a great threat, as she would have the power to cause an eternal eclipse and plunge the world into darkness, so that vampires can walk free all the time, without worrying about sunlight. At the beginning of the story, you understand that this villain is in fact very powerful, but it is not exactly clear how she would have the power to make an eclipse, which is something similar to what Hades tries to do in Saint Seiya, but later it is revealed that she was supposed to be an Egyptian goddess, so she would probably be a vampire who is serving as a vessel for this goddess, and this makes her an extremely imposing and powerful villain, and with a very curious design, because when I saw the character for the first time, I thought her look was very similar to Carmela's in the film Vampire Hunter and Bloodlust, but I knew she probably wouldn't be Carmela, as she already appeared and died in the previous series. The series has 8 episodes, and the last one is obviously the most cathartic because it is when the battle against the villain takes place, who is practically invincible, and this also surprised me. I thought the series would follow a closed story. I imagined that in the 8th episode the villain would be defeated and we would have a teaser of a possible new threat at the end, but instead we have a much better ending, in which the heroes are defeated, making the feeling of threat grow even more, and ending with a scene that I really liked. I didn't expect it. Seriously, the series ends with the appearance of a character who will make fans vibrate with excitement. I won't say who it is, but if you watched it, you know who I'm talking about. At that moment, hope arises that the protagonists might have some chance, and you wonder what role this character will have in the plot, but at that time the last episode comes to an end, and that is the only flaw in this series. It ends. But what about you? What did you think of Castlevania Nocturne? Leave it in the comments, and if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel to follow the next content. Until next time, my people, demonic hugs.